Hello everyone and welcome back to Warhammer videos. So today we're going to be looking how to make some super fast bases using Green Stuff World rollers. So I wanted to do a review, but nobody really cares about reviews on YouTube, so this is going to be more of a tutorial, but it's a review. And we've got some green stuff, some Sculpey, and some really cheap DAS air drying clay. Also from Green Stuff World, not only do we have the textured rollers themselves, we've got this plain one for smoothing out the clay or green stuff in the first place, some round cutters which will allow us to cut to the size of the bases, and these silicone rings which keep the rollers off the base to a certain height. Really good tip before we begin: when working with clay or green stuff, just get some water, mix in some talcum powder like this, and make yourself like a talky water, for lack of a better description, and mix that up, and then so long as you keep your fingers and the clay covered in this, it should avoid most of the sticking. So first up, we're going to get some green stuff and just knead it together as you normally would, and keep twisting and twisting until it's green. Once it's green, then it's pretty much ready to use. Just put it down and roll it out. You can use one of these plain rollers like this, but if you haven't forked out for one of them, there's nothing stopping you getting the container for any of your other ones and just rolling it flat using that. So I tried out these rings as well, and they're pretty good. The concept's brilliant, but you get 3 different sizes in the pack. The problem is the medium to the small. With the medium, that to me still makes the thickness of the material you're rolling too wide. Oh, and by the way, when you roll, be careful, because you're likely to stick the actual material to the roller. This happened to me quite a few times. When it comes to actually rolling with the roller, so because the silicone stands were too deep, I just had to carefully and gently roll the texture mat across the surface. But as you start rolling onto the surface, it really grabs onto the material, and this was the same with green stuff, the same with Sculpey, with DAS, and it lifts it up. So initially you've just got to try and prise it away until you start getting into the main body of the texture, and then just give it a steady roll all the way over the surface. As you can see here, it's still grabbing on. This did take a few tries to get right, and I ended up having to re-roll it out a few good goes. The other thing I got in this set were the cutters, and I went straight in for the 32mm and the 40mm cutters because those are the Games Workshop base sizes, but this is actually the maximum width. So if you actually drop this down to the others supplied, the 38mm and the 30mm, these are actually the perfect size for base toppers, so I used those ones instead. With these, it's really easy to just push into the material and give it a few twists and cut away a base topper. Now, with the green stuff, because it's so malleable, it actually caused curves on the edge of many of these bases. But I was still able to get quite a few out of about £3 worth of green stuff, and then roll it up to get an extra one out of the remainder. Once done, it was just a case of lifting these off the surface I'd used for cutting them, and then sticking them on some grease-proof baking paper. This just made sure that they didn't stick, and then once they were dry, I could easily lift them off and use them for gluing to the bases. We've got Sculpey. So I'm going to point this out right here. I've never used this stuff. It was recommended to me, and it is brittle. It doesn't feel like any kind of clay or material I've used before. This is the extra fine, which I was told will give me a much better result on my bases, and it did. I'll show you that in the results section, but it's so fine, it just sort of chops up, and I had to chop it into little pieces, and then you have to push it together and fold it and roller it, and knead it, and then fold it and roller it again, and I just kept going and going and going, and every time you fold it, it just cracks like this, and it sort of makes you second guess yourself, have I done it right or not? And then as I say, the actual cracks are actually adding sort of part of the texture to it. Again, you'll see this in a minute, but I certainly wasn't expecting on the way in to have to spend 40 minutes going through this same process. So in the end, I broke it down into 2 sections and then took a flat roller to knead it out. And this actually gave me the finest surface of all of the materials. And then it's just a case of taking your texture roller and rolling it across the surface. Once again, like the others, this does grab onto it and it's sort of difficult to follow, and I've mixed up the two different patterns here so I could have a bit of a play. I've got an idea how I want to use this based on what I've heard and what I've seen, so I'm just having to play with the patterns here because I've got quite a bit of it over the green stuff. I can try a few of the different textures. This second time I remembered add some water and some talc to stop it sticking, and this generally helps the roller release from the surface. So once again, we're using this runic one. In case you can't tell, I've really fallen in love with this texture, this sort of pattern, and I'm going to be using that on a lot of my bases going forward because it's so detailed and so crazy and so usable. But then again, I've mixed this in at the end with some of this sort of ice effect or frozen landscape to see how that comes out. It's also worth noting with this stuff, unlike the other two, highly recommended that you bake this to make it go off rather than just let it air dry. So here's me trying to lift it from the surface of this IKEA chopping board without breaking it, and then once I've lifted it, I'm just going to put it onto a greaseproof tray ready for the oven. But again, I'm using some of these rings to just cut out a few bases so that we can try out a few techniques. But you'll notice I leave the majority of this here just sort of like splayed out and rolled out. I'll get onto this and why I've done this in a minute, but just pick out areas with a few features like this one here that had a nice little crack in it naturally. And last but not least, let's try some DAS. And immediately out the packet, this is the most malleable of all the three substances. This stuff's cheap as chips. This whole bag, I think I got 2 bags of this for like £6. I've just chopped a bit away here because we're going to be trying it 2 different ways. This sort of cracks as it dries, so it's recommended to use PVA glue. So this piece here will be the control piece where we don't add anything. So just add some PVA glue. When I say some, I mean some. I don't know how much. There's no magical formula, so I just added some, and then you've got to mix it. And if you haven't added enough, then add some more. You can kind of tell if you've added enough. If it goes too sloppy, then it's too PVA. This is maybe too much. I don't really know. But yeah, so just add some. This is a little assistance. My hands got absolutely covered, so I haven't suddenly got smaller, smoother hands. My daughter's actually helping me here apply some talc to the surface. This is rolling out the control piece, so as you can see already it's quite malleable, quite sticky, and even with all the water it sticks to the roller itself. Again, with the PVA glue, it's more of the same. It's not so much rolling out as being pushed out. Trying to roll this stuff is like having car tires stuck in mud. It's just not going anywhere. In the end, I completely gave up trying to roll it, and I just sort of pushed it flat, and then with a wet roller kind of smoothed out the surface towards the end. So just something to be aware of with this stuff. Maybe there's a better formula of sort of a PVA balance, but I couldn't find it. So again, I just cut some more bases out of that stuff and then got them ready to stick to the actual Games Workshop bases. Just painting on some super glue, and then you take these ones starting with the green stuff and then just line it up with the base, let it stick. Obviously super glue's really quick setting, so try and get it right first time or you'll struggle like I did. But here you go, here's a load of them made out of that one wodge of green stuff. We'll have another look once they're painted. Same with the Sculpey, so as you can see there's some features here. These have dried nice and hard, and you've got some details there that have been picked up that I didn't want them to. Same again, just get some super glue down on your base, line it up, stick it down, and you're good to go. The only thing with these ones is you've really got to press it down because the baking actually caused it to raise off the surface. So what I ended up doing is sticking them upside down and getting the bottle of PVA I had, and that bottle of PVA there, that's actually got one of the bases under it, just pressing it down as it dries. They're still quite flexible, so you've got some time to get it set to the actual surface of the base and to keep them flat. Once it's dry, as you can see, the actual surface is pretty flush with the actual side of it. You can, if you want, sand them down and get the gap smoother or put some filler in there, but for a few quick and simple bases, you know, this will do. And the detail on these has popped out really, really well. The other cool thing you can do with these, as was recommended to me, and this has been the most fun from this whole project, just get some of this. If you just leave it rolled out like this, measure it up to a base and then just snap bits off. And what you'll find is, due to the fine texture of it, those folds and those creases that I was having trouble with when I was trying to knead it actually end up making it look more like realistic sort of poured concrete. And then the best thing is, if you get some of this stuff, just some cork board, line it up, pull it off, this will actually look like sort of hardcore underneath, or, you know, worn away earth and brittle stuff. So sticking this to the other one can turn these pretty simple bases, sort of just cut out circular bases, in some quick and easy scenic ones. So I've just stuck a ton of them here to a board with super glue, and then it's just a case now of peeling them off one at a time. This took absolutely no time at all. So once I'd snapped all of the different models off, I apologize for the background noise. This is what happens when you record a YouTube video while your kid's playing with a Lego Christmas presents. But yeah, getting back to it, so just peel away the bits of cork here, and then before you know it, you end up with an absolute ton of ready to stick on scenic bases. So here's an example of just how many I came away with. So there's probably about 30 bases worth here, all of different styles, varieties, and then stick them all together, and before you know it, your scenic bases are all but done. So back to the next one. So we've got the DAS material here. One thing I also tried was some of this on baking foam, but there were problems. The baking foam wasn't firm enough, so as it cured and went off, it actually just bent. So this entire piece here is just a complete waste of material. But I have heard online, if you reintroduce water to this stuff, you can actually turn it back into moldable clay. So I might actually try that at some point. So as we go through it a bit further, so I'm just going to pull it off here. I think the best thing for this was this foldable chopping board, and then you can just use this to bend away and then flex away the material, and it literally just pops off the surface with absolutely no effort whatsoever. So even though the DAS was the least detailed of the three, it did snap away really easily. So the weird thing is because this is so water based, as you sort of cut away with it, anything that the water mixes with, it sort of leaves a residual surface of like wet clay. So all of those gaps just get filled. This piece here was the control piece where I didn't add any PVA, and as you can see, let's just throw it away. So once again, back to glue. So just cover the base in glue and then stick down one of the surfaces, and that'll give you a nice sort of smooth finish and line it up with the base. With these though, there's kind of a papery edge that's left. This is what I was talking about before, that sort of watery clay piece. And it's almost like papery. So the same when you snap this stuff, it doesn't give like the layered textured surface that the Sculpey does. It just leaves like a really, again, I can't describe it other than kind of papery edge. So just something to be aware of with this stuff. Again, it's the cheapest stuff. It doesn't stop you making bases at the end of the day, and it's still good. But I found, especially with these sort of round match to the edge bases, the best thing to do is to just give them a quick sand and get rid of that weird papery texturiness. Once it's done, just cover the gaps in some PVA glue where you've done these splits, cover it in some sand and modelling materials, push it down, leave it to dry, and then you've got a few. So I had quite a few of these to do, and well, let's see the result. Ta-da! Right, so now we've got them primed, let's have a proper look at the detail. So first up, in the same order, Green Stuff World. This has come out really well. It's retained a lot of the detail, but what I've found with all of them, when you're doing the sort of more mechanical and factory bases, then they look too unrealistic, unfortunately. You've got to have such a perfect roll with these, otherwise, you know, they're no good unless you want to make some sort of really rusty metals. But for things like this, for more like outdoor kind of concrete style, they work really, really well. But all of them I've found, if you push too deep, you get these ridges in them, and that's just due to the rollers themselves. This is the Sculpey. As you can see, that's really popped, really good detail on all of these. This one, you can even see where I tried to roll out this sort of runic pattern and then flattened it again and then rolled in the runic pattern. It's kept some of that surface detail. And the sort of subsurface, the substructure, I think's popped really well with these. But again, you also get the ridges with the Sculpey. The DAS, this is the one with the worst detail. I mean, again, you get water into the clay and you just end up with, you know, like when you get too much paint on a model. Here, for example, is the stone texture right up against Sculpey, and you can see the difference between the DAS on the left, Sculpey on the right. So it's good, it does the job, and for a really, really cheap moulding clay, again, it's £3–4 just for a pack of it, and you can get tons out of a pack, even when you mix it with some PVA glue. This will do the job, but again, not so great when it comes to mechanical bases. Back to the Green Stuff World ones, I've just thrown some paints on here, so just 4 Pro Acryl colours because the coverage is brilliant. And again, they've popped out really well, but you've got some of the ridges in there, you can get away with it. With the factory ones, this is what I meant, unless you're going to throw rust effects at it and make it look, you know, really worn and torn, which, let's be fair, it's 40k, you're gonna, then they just look unnatural and daft. With the Sculpey, as you can see, the winter, the frozen bases, because I've pushed so deep with the roller, you've got a load of them ridges. So this just looks, it doesn't look realistic at all. And this is after a dry brush and a deep wash. But I think this one's popped out really, really well. This is with the substructure, the sort of hardcore beneath it. Just a warm wash on that earthy colour, a cool dry brush on top, and then a few washes just to make it pop, and some static grass is really good. And then finally, I couldn't get much out of the DAS. I did a couple of dry brush passes and then threw some AK weathering sort of, I think this one's some kind of grime or something like that. But again, the bit that ruins it for me and stops these being really good scenic bases is those ridges that just seem to pop out everywhere. With a dry brush, as you kind of want to use on surfaces, it just kind of takes that stone effect away. So here they all are, again, for what is essentially an afternoon's work. This is really, really good. I'm really impressed with the results of these. No effort at all. And if you're doing them in a batch, it'll take absolutely no time to chuck out hundreds of them. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful as a kind of tutorial / review. For more things in your hobby, stay tuned to FauxHammer. Like, comment, subscribe. FauxHammer out.